A very warm welcome to everybody this lovely Saturday afternoon. I think it's Saturday, isn't it? Yes, it is indeed. Saturday, welcome to Live at the Waterhole, Wild Earth in association with Africam. And we've started this afternoon, as we did yesterday afternoon, with our elephant bulls here at Tembe Elephant Park in Maputoland. What a lovely way to start, as always. And a very warm welcome to all of you watching. If this is your first time joining us, my name is Ben Coley. I'll be here for the next 2 hours and we will do our daily little visit to a variety of cameras all around southern and eastern Africa and see what delights nature has in store for us today. It's live, it's interactive, so please do send in your questions and comments. It's always great to hear from you and gives me questions to answer. And hopefully we can have an interesting discussion about whatever it is that pops up. But for now, we are going to enjoy these lovely elephants that are, well, they are also enjoying what looks to be some beautiful weather down in KZN. Doesn't look like they've had any rain since yesterday. We had a little drizzle here in the Lowveld last night, and some rather ominous looking clouds that didn't actually deliver anything, a few distant lightning flashes, but nothing really to write home about last night. Very, very humid in this area after the recent rains that we've had. But wonderful to see so many of the waterholes yesterday with lots and lots of water in, particularly where we are in the Sabi Sands, in the surrounding area. But if you didn't join us yesterday, you missed a treat. We had these elephants down in Tembe. We had a delightful time up in Kenya at Lentoro Waterhole, looking at birds and impalas and little squirrels. We saw an ostrich at Tau. It was a great day yesterday. So we'll see what is in store for us today. The elephant's very much enjoying the shade. We did have one or two yesterday that ventured into the water and had a little bit of a splish splash around. It'd be lovely if we see the same again today. There is something so delightful about watching elephants frolic in the water. They do seem to elicit more enjoyment out of it than any other animals that we see go down to the water to cool off, particularly the youngsters. Although, say, if you haven't joined us before, we do regularly see this group of bulls at Tembe. In the times that I've been doing this, I don't recall ever seeing a breeding herd down here at this specific waterhole on this camera. These bulls seem to monopolize this area. It has become one of their favorite spots. It looks like there's a nice breeze, and I'm sure there's a few antelope around as well. We saw some Inyala and some Impala here yesterday. So who knows what might be joining us today. I suppose it is Saturday Cataday, so you never know. Maybe, cross fingers. I think I've only ever had a couple of cats. Very brief sighting of some lions. Well, I can't. I think, ironically, at Cat Eye Pan one time, and we had a beautiful sighting of a leopard at Jabulani's waterhole, I think, as well, a little while ago. But Jen Mac, you saying that it's a distinctly cooler day for you over in London, where it's 2 degrees. I haven't checked the temperature today here in the Lowveld, but I imagine it's somewhere in the mid-30s, but with the real feel and the high humidity factor, probably in the high 30s, I would think. In Penelope Kenyon, a week of rain on its way to the coast tonight. Well, my sympathies to some extent, but enjoy the rain and please do send more of it up here. Although we do have rain forecast as well in the future, but the forecasts this side do have a tendency to promise rain and never really deliver much. So I shall believe it when I see it. I'm actually hoping for a relatively clear night, which the forecast suggests that it will be this evening, because I have an astronomy evening lined up for this evening. Speaking of which, if any of you were lucky enough to have clear skies last night, I hope you enjoyed the beautiful conjunction of the crescent moon with Venus. It was very, very striking last night. And there'll be another one this evening as Venus will be very, very close to Saturn in the sky. Won't be as bright as Venus, but still very, very cool. And I'm not sure exactly how close they will be, but through the telescope, there's a chance that you might even see both of them in the same field of view with a wide-angle eyepiece. So yeah, crossing fingers because there's some beautiful objects to have a look at this time of year. Going to be enjoying the Orion Nebula, the Tarantula Nebula, Great Globular Cluster 47 Tucana, the Pleiades, of course, the Seven Sisters. But before we get too distracted, let's get back to our elephants. One was having a little bit of a play in the mud, who seems to be unceremoniously booted by this larger male who's decided that that does indeed look like a nice patch of mud, and he is going to have a little play around there instead. Always interesting to watch their antics. Harriet Hodgkin, you're saying it's a beautiful sunny day in Cape Town and it's beach day weather. Well, I hope you can make it to the beach. But of course, down in Cape Town, you never really know what the weather's going to do down there. But I do see that it looks as if it's been relatively clear in that area of late. So, yes, I hope you can get down to the beach and enjoy all of the associated pleasures of a nice, cool ocean. Got a young male impala braving the gauntlet in between all these great leviathans. Let's see if this elephant has a problem with it. Yep, nope, my waterhole, get out. Always entertaining. Sandy Franklin 69, you're so ready to see some lion cubs. Well, absolutely. If you can arrange some lion cubs for today's show, that would be wonderful. But you just never know. Unlikely, but not impossible. So let's put it in the hands of fate and everybody put out some positive lion cub vibes. Very happily take that. Oh, look at this elephant having a bit of a mud pack in the back. Awesome to see. I do miss elephants. The 8 or 9 months or so, or the best part of a year, I spent out of the country last year and at the beginning of this year. I think more than anything else, I missed just spending time with these elephants. I have a huge amount of respect for them and what they're capable of, particularly as I've spent more and more time around them. My comfort distance to elephants is probably not what it used to be, but I think that's the same for many of us who've been in this industry for a while. We have enough run-ins and we see and experience what they are capable of, but they are still something very, very special and humbling and spiritual to spend time with elephants. They delight us, and there's so much that we can learn from them. They are such anthropomorphic animals, and we can really relate to elephants more so than anything else out here, I think. Baby elephants will always be my favorite. Along with baby warthogs, I did see some baby warthogs here in the estate I am yesterday. We had interesting, well, I'm not sure, there was two females, so I'm guessing it was two sets of offspring, but there were three of them, two a little bit bigger and one either the runt of the litter, because they did seem to be hanging out with one specific female, but there was another female in the area, or possibly the youngsters were just socializing together. But our little tiny baby warthogs, a great favorite of mine as well. This one having a little scratch of his back foot on the rock. Just relax. You said you're going to Tembe at the end of the month. Well, I wish you an incredible time there. It's actually one of the parks that I have not been to. I was fortunate enough to work in the KwaZulu-Natal area for around about a year, but wow, I'm going back to probably about 2008, where I worked at a place called Tunda Private Game Reserve, which has changed an awful lot over that time, but I never got up to Tembe. It's somewhere I'd like to get to, certainly, but honestly, I haven't been to KZN or the coast for, I would think, at least 6 or 7 years now. But there are so many places that I need to get to, it's difficult to know where to start. Ah, we've got one going in for a paddle. You're going to have a little lie down and thrash about? Nope, just taking a shortcut, I think. Always interesting to see how much they spray behind their ears to help with their thermoregulation. Sorry, everybody, I have Tulu in my ear today in Johannesburg. Tulu, you said something, but I was too busy waffling on about mud and elephant ears. Could you repeat it, please? Ah, we're going to go down to Stony Point. Speaking of the beach, let's go enjoy some ocean views. There we go, back to our big colony of Cape cormorants. We saw lots and lots of these yesterday. I actually had some interesting questions came through because we were discussing the uric acid deposits of birds in general and the way their digestive system or their excretory system works differently to ours. Their kidneys producing uric acid and a lot less water. We produce urea, of course, but uric acid in a much more concentrated form in birds, lots of excess nitrogen and phosphorus. And we saw some of the rocks that were absolutely pasted with all that bird droppings, or guano as it's also known. And somebody asked what happens to it. Does it remain there? A lot of it will get washed into, I think it was George actually, but a lot of it will get washed into the water. And rather like hippos are such an important vector of bringing nutrients from the land into the water in many reserves, marine birds do exactly the same thing. They deposit that guano on rocks or in the water, the rain comes in, washes it off, it engages with the aquatic ecosystem, and it's very, very important. And in fact, the guano industry, in terms of a fertilizer, is worth hundreds of millions of dollars per year. And there is a big concern with the loss of the threats to seabirds of what the upshot is going to be on marine populations, because it acts just like a fertilizer, and something like, particularly on coral reefs and things, 10 to 15% of the fish there rely on it, or with a good amount of guano in that area, you can expect 10 or 15% more fish there, which is obviously important for fisheries. So by overfishing the seas, we're also threatening the population of seabirds, which has a knock-on effect again to the marine ecosystems and the amount of fish that we could theoretically fish. So once again, everything in nature very, very important, and even something as potentially mundane as bird droppings has a knock-on effect. Corals will utilize it as well from a fertilizer perspective, aquatic plants, lots of important things being returned to the marine environment by these birds. Jen Mac saying, along with dussies, you think elephants are your favourites? Especially the little baby elephant this morning. Well, I regret to say that I was not able to follow what was out on drive this morning because thanks to a power cut for about 5 hours. In fact, I wasn't even sure I would be able to be present for today, but thankfully the power has returned. The fans can be turned on because it's very warm and humid here. So I'm sorry that I missed out on the little baby elephant, but I have no doubt that it was utterly delightful because they always are. And maybe if we're lucky, Jen Mac, we will see the dussies here at Stony Point. There were none visible yesterday. Happy to see all these birds having a bit of splish splash in the water. And those of you who are invested as I am in my new bird table and bird bath, I have great excitement to report that yesterday on the little trap camera that I've got set up next to it, I had a white-browed scrub robin having a bath, I had a blue waxbill having a bath, a dove came to drink, the bulbuls are still around, and this morning I had a bunting, a golden-breasted bunting, who also came to have a little dip. None of them have made it to the bird table yet, but great to know that the birds have found the bird bath. Apologies for dragging you into my avian obsession, but those of you who understand or have similar interests will understand my excitement at all these new visitors. This is often where the dussies hang out, but no sign today as of yet. No dussies today at Stony Point. Maybe hiding away in one of those little crevices. That's where they do like to sleep. Often all huddled together because they struggle with thermoregulation. And so they do often sleep in a great big sort of pile together. I often see them sunning themselves on rocks. And again, because of their rocky habitat, their preference to particularly out here in the low veldt, you'll often find them associated with what we call the little koppies, those granite outcrops. Very little water there, so just like with birds, they produce a very concentrated uric acid based excretia because they do not have access to much water themselves. So one of the main reasons to produce that rather sort of thick gloopy substance is to prevent water loss and dehydration. There's a dussie. We found one. Well done, zoomies. It's on the right of screen. Is that on the top of the rock? Is that another cormorant? It looks like it's just sitting funny, or do we have a white chest there? It's a white-breasted cormorant. Badgerbud, yes, no penguins today. We did see some African penguins yesterday, but as you say, possibly out on the hunt today. perfect weather. I was lucky enough to see a couple of lovely penguins out in New Zealand, both of which are highly endangered. The little blue penguins I saw down at Stewart Island, a little colony of them returning early evening after another hunting trip, and then was lucky enough to see a solitary yellow-eyed penguin. I can't honestly remember where it was when I saw that, but it's a particular area designated for their conservation, and there was a hide, and I spent 2 hours in that hide, hoping that we were going to see a yellow-eyed penguin, and indeed one did finally emerge from the water onto the beach. Not where we were expecting it, apparently where they normally come out, because there was a colony of seals there, and apparently the seals have begun to occasionally take penguins, which is causing them to also have to rethink their movements. But beautiful things, yellow-eyed penguins. And only potentially 5 to 7,000 individuals left in the world. Very therapeutic to just sit and watch the gentle motion of the waves. So many people, of course, drawn to the oceans. I myself am not a massive ocean goer. I get bored on the beach quite quickly. I like to go and swim, I like to go and snorkel, but I've never been one for just lying on the beach. I also hate bright sunshine. I don't have much melanin in my body. I burn very, very badly. I've had some awful experiences in direct sunlight. Never much shade on the beach, so I have to take an umbrella with me. But there is something very therapeutic about just watching that gentle undulating motion of the waves. I usually end up digging holes and sandcastles and creating water channels and things. I guess the big kid in me. So these definitely all do look like do look like Cape cormorants. And so just one solitary white. Oh no, one on the left possibly is a white-breasted cormorant. Looks a little bit larger and chunkier than the others. Obviously, the white breast would give it away if it was to turn around, but I think I see a little bit of white on the chin there. One that we do get in this area, of course, we see white-breasted cormorants from time to time, as well as the reed cormorants. The rest do look like Cape cormorants. There's a definite size difference to that one on the flat rock. That's interesting. Thank you, Picasso. You're saying that Marcel van Horben found out in 2009, 2010 that the black band of the saddle-billed stork's bill joined the red tip in a completely unique fashion. I assume that you mean for each individual, and it's an identification feature. And yes, it's unique for every saddle-billed stork. And there was a thesis written on it. That's very interesting. That's not something that I've heard before. It can be so difficult, of course, to identify individual birds. Oh, there's a penguin. That's why we do ring them in order to try and get information and try and follow individuals for their general habits. So that is very interesting. I will see if I can find that paper. It's not something that I've ever noticed. But yeah, next time I do see a saddle-billed stork, I shall have my binos trained to my eyes and see if I can see a little bit more about what that's discussing. Thank you, Picasso. Interesting stuff. This is a wonderful forum for sharing interesting information like that. How was your hunting trip, Mr. or Mrs. Penguin? Getting back to birds' defecation processes, it seems that penguins actually can fire their droppings quite a considerable distance away from themselves. They think it's one of the ways to keep their nesting areas a little bit cleaner. And if you would like to know the minimum safe distance to be away from a penguin to avoid projectile uric acid, apparently it's 1.34 meters, if I recall that I read a little earlier. Did do a little bit of impromptu research on bird droppings. And they have a tendency to spray their neighbours, which is not very neighbourly of them, but I suppose look after number one to some extent. And there are, of course, many different things that mimic bird droppings for protection and for camouflage. Over here we have something that's known as the bird dropping spider, which looks exactly like bird droppings when it's sitting on a leaf. There's also a type of praying mantid that also mimics bird droppings. Those spiders also give off a smell, apparently, to mimic the bird droppings, to try and make them unpleasant or unseeable or hidden away from potential predators. It's amazing, even something as simple as bird droppings, not only is it environmentally important for a variety of reasons, but so much so that even other organisms have started to mimic it. Sandy Franklin, you want to know who controls the cameras? Well, I have never met them. I know them affectionately as Zoomies, who are people, I believe, employed volunteering, who have access to the cameras and move them around. So I think to some extent they follow what I say, and I try and discuss whatever it is that they pick out. But well known for their eagle eyes of finding interesting things. But I've never knowingly met a Zoomie. They may be mythical creatures like unicorns, who knows? Okay, that was a lovely visit to the ocean. Great to see so many cormorants and a bit of an ocean breeze and some lapping waves. But we are going to zoom right up to the northwest of South Africa now and check in at Tower Lodge at Madikwe. And a lone young elephant bull feeding on some of this lovely grass. Looks like quite a few of the trees in the background have yet to spawn great amounts of leaves. I'm not sure how much rainfall they've had up in Madikwe, but obviously some recently because Tau waterhole is looking very, very full now, whereas a month or two ago, again, it was predominantly little muddy puddles and not much more. And everything benefiting from this nice flush of grass. Elephants, of course, this time of year. Oh, what's irritated you? Will be eating probably about 80% grass and only 20% or so of leaves and barks and roots and tubers and things. And that will flip during the winter months when all the grass dies back. Lovely contrast to the geology of the area as well. Very reddish soils up there in Madikwe that you can see all the mud that's been plastered onto him, or the dust, whereas the ones down in Tembe looked a lot darker in colour. And we've got a lone weaver that I can see at the front as well, busy making his nest. Have to get a little bit closer to know for sure which species, but I will go with southern masked, I think. Notoriously difficult to identify some of the weavers. Not so difficult, or not so tricky if during the summer months when the males develop their breeding plumage, but when they revert to their eclipse plumage in the winter, they can be quite tricky to tell apart. But the three most difficult ones are always the village weaver, the southern mast, and the lesser mast weaver. But easiest way I find is to look at their heads or their eyes. So the lesser mask has a white eye or a pale eye, which makes that one very distinguishable. And then the southern mast of the village, there is a slight difference to the amount of black on the head. But also, if you look at the back, the southern mast has a relatively plain olivey coloured back, whereas the village weaver has a much more spotted back. So this one looks like it has a relatively plain back. So I'm going to stick with my southern mast weaver. I can't even say them correctly. And the village weaver used to be called a spotted backed weaver for that reason. Sandy Franklin, doesn't it look amazing after the rains, isn't it? It's just incredible what a little deluge can do. And again, also interesting to see what this elephant is going for. I mean, look how short that grass is that he's plucking from the floor there. Really struggling even to sort of wrap the trunk around those little shoots, but just goes to show that that short grass is very, very tasty and worth the extra effort. Also excited to say that a lot of the marula trees in this area have started to produce and drop their marulas, and they're beginning to ripen. So the elephants will be having an absolute field day soon with all the marula trees, as will we for that matter. But yeah, a veritable ocean here at Tau. But we are going to head up now to Lentoro in Kenya and see what's happening at that beautiful waterhole there yesterday, which was so prolific. Oh, that lovely little squirrel is back again. I really enjoyed watching the squirrels move around yesterday. So cool to be up so close to them. I have to say my knowledge of Kenyan squirrels is not wonderful, but having just done a quick check since we've seen them 2 days running now, it seems that in terms of ground squirrels, because this very much looks like a ground squirrel from its body shape, you have an unstriped and a striped ground squirrel. I see no stripes, so I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that this is an unstriped ground squirrel. We saw some absolutely spectacular red-billed firefinches having a drink here yesterday. And there's one today. Brightly coloured male and a few females there. Spas, you're asking if these squirrels communicate using their tails like the Kalahari squirrels? Spas, I'm afraid I don't know. I'm actually sitting here having a quick sort of skim of if I can find anything interesting out about these ground squirrels. I haven't found or read anything just in a quick skim that they do use their tails, but I wouldn't be surprised. It's a fairly obvious feature. And so I'm delighting in their lovely white eye rings. I'm sure those are used in social interactions. Interested to know whether they also use their tails for shade. I'm sure they do, just like the ground squirrels do over here. Wild at Heart saying those squirrels seem bigger than the ones in Juma. What? Yeah, normally the ones we see in Juba, the ones we see in Juma are known as I think it's Smith's bush squirrel now. It used to just be known as a tree squirrel. They are smaller. This is a type of ground squirrel, which is generally a little bit larger. Difficult to get a sense of scale here, of course. Oh, white-browed sparrow weaver at the back. I would assume similar in size to the ground squirrels that we do get here in South Africa. And you're also saying how you love the 5 finches. So do I must say. These ones that look so vibrant. I mentioned it many times yesterday. And so what I assume to be a white-browed sparrow weaver here. Ah, and a lovely, I'm guessing, superb starling, but I will have to double check. That incredible eye. I must get up to Kenya at some point. So I spent a year in Tanzania, but right in the south of Tanzania, where actually a lot of the bird life is very, very similar to what we would expect here in southern Africa. I didn't see very many species that were unique to that area. When I went up to Arusha, when I was sort of flying in and out, there it was very, very different. It seems that there was sort of a line across the middle of Tanzania whereby the diversity of birds or the different species very much changed. And there were lots of new ones to find in the northern side, but in the southern side, yeah, very similar in terms of what you would expect to see in southern Africa. Quite sure what these mysterious things are. Ooh, more sparrow weavers. They also make those rather untidy looking nests out of dry grass, usually in colonies. Hilary B, you're saying that your squirrels, if they feel threatened, put the tail over his back and wags it profusely. Yeah, absolutely. Certainly, that's what I expect from the tree squirrels. I see no reason that the ground squirrels wouldn't do the same. So, one of the things that we look for when trying to find a predator, if you hear the squirrel alarm calling, if you find one up in a tree looking, alarm calling, looking in a particular direction, you'll normally find that that tail, yes, is raised almost like a scorpion tail up over the back and moves in time with the alarm calls and generally sort of points in the direction of the potential danger. So it's actually a very useful way that we can find a predator out in the bush. But you have to be a little bit careful with squirrels. They are very vocal, particularly this time of year, especially the females. When she's coming into estrus, she will make an awful lot of noise. And it sounds very, very similar to an alarm call. And they do have a tendency, much to the annoyance of the dominant male or of her male in that area. She will advertise the fact that she is an estrus to anybody and anyone who is listening, which can obviously then attract other males to that area and lead to some disputes with the territorial male. Yeah, a lovely Rupel's starling that we saw there, named after a German naturalist, of which there are various things named after. I'm not sure if he's Doctor or Mr. Rupel. Rupel's vulture probably being the most famous, but a lovely trip there to Lentoro. Let's head back over to Tau and check in on our elephant. A lovely face-on view of him. Just a youngster, this one. Again, always very difficult to gauge the age. Well, that's a good rhyme. Gauge the age of the elephant. But I would say in his early 20s, perhaps, late teens. Always difficult without a sense of a scale with a larger one next to him, but you can see this elephant's got a lot more growing to do. Although nicely sunken forehead and around the temple area there, which is often a sign of age, but a lot more growing to be done. So, yeah, late teens, early 20s, perhaps. I was asked a question yesterday as to whether some elephants are always solitary or do they always form these little bachelor groups. And say the simple answer is uh, there probably are some that prefer a more solitary existence, particularly the older ones, but younger bulls like this will go off, I'm sure, and go on a bit of a walkabout and explore the area. But I imagine that he has probably got some companions that at some point he will meet up and discuss their tales and adventures over time. But it is part of being an adult male elephant, much more solitary. They don't hang out in certainly the breeding herd situation. Those ones in Tembe do always seem to be together. But up here in the Kruger area, it's very normal to come across individuals, although whether they are just quite literally out on their own or still part of a bachelor group which is just spread out over a very, very large area, feeding and minding their own business and enjoying some personal space for a while, I guess we will never truly know. But that's part of the delight of being out here. You go out, you observe, you find out new things. Don't always trust what you read in the books. Rely on your observations and make inferences based upon them. How we learn. Animal lover, you're asking if there are plants that are more nutritious than other plants. Yes, absolutely. There are toxic plants. There are plants that are that taste nicer than others. Ones that are rich in tannins and other things. Elephants well known for being very specific in their choices of plant material that they choose. Well known for self-medicating, being able to identify those toxins and having a knowledge of what chemicals are present and knowing what they need and will choose things accordingly. It is very normal to see an elephant in a field of beautiful, palatable grass, just picking out specific little creepers and things that are growing there. So, yeah, absolutely, there are plants that will be avoided and plants that will be specifically chosen based upon the needs. And I'm sure to some extent just taste. Some things taste nicer than others. And of course, then you have animals which have developed immunities against certain chemicals. The classic example being things like porcupines and black rhinos, which are quite capable of digesting or at least not getting any ill effect from some of those trees with that white milky latex, which is highly, highly toxic, enough to kill us or blind us or cause very unpleasant pain if you get it into an open cut. So interesting how animals have adapted. And we have a lovely grey heron here. It's always interesting. I find this time of year that we're going to see the elephants choosing more tannin-rich trees. So, for example, the silver cluster leaf is something they don't normally feed upon too much because it's very, very rich in tannins, as those of you who have tasted it will know. I actually did. Who was it? I think it was Panda. I made taste a silver cluster leaf, and then we agitated the tree to stimulate more tannin production. And in a matter of minutes, it tasted worse and even more unpleasant. But with the elephants this time of year about to include a massive amount of citric acid in their diet, with all the marulas beginning to ripen now, tannin is a natural binding agent of the stomach. It's used locally, traditionally for diarrhea and stomach complaints. So often find that animals that will have a lot more citric acid intake during this time of the year will then choose tannin-rich plants in order to try and deal with the stomach issues that eating a lot of fruit can bring with it. This grey heron, though, I imagine will be hoping for some fish and some frogs, various other aquatic life to satiate his hunger, I have no doubt. Oh, this is a very therapeutic moment with this young elephant bull, looking very, very happy with himself. such an amazing backdrop there at Midikwe as well, with those stunning mountains. And just getting back to Lentora there, can I say thank you? I see you've sent through some of the other firefinches that are found up in Kenya and northern Tanzania, and you've mentioned a bar-breasted firefinch, which is a new one to me that I've just been having a look at, and does look very similar to the red-billed firefinch. Very similar indeed. Um, from looking at the pictures, I would say it's possibly slightly more vibrant than the red-billed. So next time we go back to Lentoro, I'm going to have to go and have a look to see whether we can nail down which one of those two species it is. But that's one of the things I love about birding. 10,000 or so species worldwide, and you'll never learn all of them, or it's very difficult to learn all of them. So thank you for sending that through. That's increased my firefinch knowledge. And we'll definitely have a look next time we can. Samantha Southey, you commenting on the coloration of the elephant. Was I think you were asking possibly what type of elephant this is. It is an African elephant, Loxodonta africana. Remember, we had the forest elephant and the Indian elephant. Those are really the only three elephant species that you're going to find anywhere in the world. Um, and it is an African elephant. The coloration is purely because of the soil. If you look at the rocks at the back on those mountains there, you'll see that there's a lot of reddish coloured soil and reddish coloured rocks due to a very high iron content in the soil. And elephants do have a tendency to cover themselves in dust to help deal with parasites and deal with sun. They like to play around in the mud. So the colour of the animal is very much just dictated by the geology of the area. If you go to certain areas of Namibia where there's an excess of calcium in some of those soils, you'll get very whitish coloured elephants, very dark elephants. If it's a very sort of nutritious, dark, loamy soil, so they're all African elephants. The colour is just dictated by the type of soil. If you look at the bottom part of his ears, you can see he's rather got a two-toned effect where that dust has not been sprayed onto the ears, and you can see that more traditional greyish colour of the African elephant. And Mindy Tillipau, you're also saying, just look how green Tao is. I know, it's amazing, isn't it? I've only ever been to Tao in the winter. I've never actually been up to Madikwe in the height of summer, I don't think. Oh no, I was there with for Wild Earth. It was very green then, and we had rain, so that must have been summer a couple of years ago. And there was plenty of grass around. But most of my experience of doing these live at the waterhole sessions has been in the drier months when it was looking particularly desolate, and this whole area was just uh, compacted soil and elephant dung. There really wasn't much else to see. It looked very harsh. So great to see it with this green flush. Amazing to watch this elephant plucking that incredibly short grass. Notice that he always seems to wrap his trunk in the same direction. So going which way that clockwise, I suppose, if we create it into a vertical form. And that's very normal, just like elephants usually prefer one tusk above the other, which you'll see by wear and tear. And over the years, you'll see that notch begin to be cut out of the favored tusk as it's used as a lever to break branches across. They'll almost always, or at least have a preferred direction of trunk movement when using it for jobs such as this as well. And again, this time of year, you will see one side will be stained. The left-hand side is, or the lower side of the trunk will often have that sort of green stain on it as well to give away its dominant side. just like we're left and right-handed. I'm sure there are ambidextrous elephants as well, but 9 times out of 10, see them favouring one side over the other. Samantha Southey, you're very welcome. I hope that solved that mystery for you. But yeah, it's something you have to be aware of, these geological differences. Always makes me think of the black and white rhino debate as well. The classic story that you hear as terms of the etymology of the names of black and white rhino is that in days past, the white rhino used to be known as a white rhino, coming from the Dutch word for um, wide, which was then misconstrued or misunderstood by the English. They heard white, and instead of wide for white, they heard white. And then when the other species was found, it was then called black to distinguish the two. Um, there are some suggestions that that is actually not the case, because if you look back at the language that would have been used around that time, it's more likely to have been the word breed, meaning broad, that would have been used to describe the lip or the mouth structure of the what we would now call white rhino, or square-lipped rhino, as it should properly be known. So the other, probably slightly more believable, I think, in my mind at least, history of the name comes from the fact that the very first person to kind of document it and record the square-lipped rhino was William Burchell, who, just like Mr. Rupel, also has various birds named after him due to his trips to Africa. So William Burchell, when he first recorded the white rhino, was up in the Northern Cape, where there is a lot of calcrete, which is calcium-rich soil. So there's a very good chance that when he first saw the rhino, it was whitish in colour because of their penchant for rolling around in the mud and mud wallowing. So again, it's possible that the original name white rhino came from the coloration of the skin. And then again, the black rhino was chosen just to differentiate it. But both of them really are the same color, although black rhino I find are slightly darker in terms of skin tone than the white as a rule. Hilary B, good question. I don't know whether elephants absorb any of those minerals through their skin, things like calcium and iron that we are talking about from different soil types. I wouldn't have thought so. Their skin is not known to be particularly porous in that regard. I think if it was, they would have um, potential issues as well. It's not like a frog, which can absorb things through the skin. Um, and we do know that elephants, along with many other animals, practice what we call geophagia, which is eating of soil in order to get those minerals and nutrients. And I've seen it in Madikwe myself. Often, sort of, you see animals almost sort of scraping their teeth along termite mounds and things, and actually feeding on some of that soil, and elephants digging up soil and actually eating some of it to try and get to those minerals and nutrients that are in the soils during times of nutritional stress, or if they feel that they are in particular need of a particular mineral. So Hilary B, I doubt it. I don't believe so. Very, very thick skin, of course, an elephant as well. An inch, maybe even 2 inches in places thick. That's an awful lot of absorption that would have to go on. Annabelle, you think this looks like a very tall elephant? Again, I think it's probably just a perspective thing, maybe because he's out on his own in the open in a relatively flat area. From my experience with elephants, I still don't think this is a particularly big elephant, possibly because he's still got some filling out to do. His legs maybe look a little bit taller and longer than normal because they're slightly skinnier, perhaps. But I wouldn't personally say he's a particularly tall-looking elephant. But I agree he does have quite sort of slimline front legs, perhaps giving the illusion of height. We could, of course, double check if we could actually go and analyze one of his front foot tracks. We could measure the circumference, double it, and that would give us the shoulder height of that elephant to an accuracy to within about 10 centimeters. Mindy Tillipau, I don't know if anyone has seen the crocs since the water has returned to Tower Waterhole. If anybody has seen the crocs over the last few days, do feel free to let us know. But in the last couple of trips that we've made up here yesterday and today, whilst I've been doing live at the waterhole, we have not seen a crocodile. But I'm sure our eagle-eyed zoomies, if they do spot one, will let us know. Lelaby Kenyon are also suggesting Swahili sparrows up there in Lentoro. Well, this is all good. I'm also going to have a look at the specific bird list for Lentoro. Wow, looks like there's more rain afoot. In fact, there is rain. Looking at that water, excellent news for everybody. A proper cloudburst. Wow, that's just come out of nowhere, that rain. Look how thick it is. We can't even see, or barely see, the mountains behind this elephant. Animal lover, yes. I think you are completely correct there. We're seeing less animals at the waterholes because there has been lots of rain. So there is plenty of standing water, any low-lying areas, any depressions, all those seasonal pans have filled up, and the animals are under far less water stress now, and they can get A, water from the vegetation that they are eating, so they don't require as much water on a daily basis or as much standing water, if you like. And many of these animals are quite comfortable just drinking out of seasonal pans and little puddles. So they do not have to trek far and wide to come to these water holes. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's why we're seeing less animals. It's quite normal this time of year. It's why winter and the dry season is a very good time to actually come to these areas because the animals are forced sort of bottlenecks towards these pans and these water holes that are pumped because everything needs water. Okay, well, we are going to let this young elephant bull enjoy the deluge up here at Badiko. We're going to head back up to Lentoro for some more birding, and we'll see if we can get to the bottom of these sparrows and firefinches. Oh, that's a spectacular view, the lilac-breasted roller. Definite photographer's favourite. With a particularly fluffy forehead today. You often find birds do have almost sort of whiskers, particularly the insectivorous birds that hawk food on the wing, which rollers will also do. They help to guide the food into the mouth. Um, More so than that, than any sort of sensory information in terms of picking up environmental stimuli, but they're known as rictal bristles. We see them on things like flycatchers, the drongos, and a lot of those insect-eating birds that fly around. But this one just seems to have a particularly fluffy face, but you can see how it's fluffing up and then contracting again, whether he's just enjoying a little bit of the breeze there. And then he was gone, a little bit bashful of our discussions about his headgear. Oh, it's interesting if we can see those firefinches again. This bar-chested or bar-breasted firefinch that was mentioned could well be, as opposed to red-billed. They're very, very similar, it seems. Still trying to uh, find out if I can look at a specific difference. It's something I saw about the colour of the head. Yes, the bar-breasted firefinches, similar to the red-billed firefinch, but separated by darker brown markings on the head and the bars along the side of the chest. And a pale rather than a black undertail. So these are things that we're going to have a look for. If we see them again. Of course, this is often the way with birding. When you want to find one, you can't. You'll normally find as well, if you've got a bogey bird, like the green twin spot, which I don't believe exists. They're like unicorns and zoomies. They may or may not exist. I've managed to fail to find one for almost 2 decades now, despite everybody else I know seeing multiple ones. But when I was up in Madikwe, I also finally found a black-faced waxbill a few years ago after years and years of trying. And I think over the course of the next 2 or 3 days, I probably had 5 or 6 sightings of them. When you want a firefinch, there aren't any. I see, Mindy Tilpow, you're enjoying the coloration of that lilac-breasted roller. And Deb Davis, you want to know what crocodiles do when the water level is very low? Well, they can bury themselves into banks. They can make actually very, very deep excavations into banks, and under absolute extreme measures, they can also survive for prolonged periods of time outside of water. They'll go into what we call a state of estivation, basically, which is kind of like hibernation, although not quite the same, because it's based on the hot, dry weather. But they will just shut their internal organs down, and everything works very, very slowly. And it has the same principle. They just don't expend much metabolic energy. They don't lose much water, and they can survive for days, weeks outside of water if needs be. Those are the white-browed sparrow weaver nests we mentioned earlier. Those rather messy, untidy, grassy nests that they make. Ah, right. We found a firefinch. Good work. Now, I don't see brown on the top of the head, so I'm going to stick with red-billed. Yeah, it does look like red on the top of the head. If we can see the underside of the tail, are we seeing black or pale? That would be the next thing. It definitely looks like a red top to the head to me. I also think I'd have to go back and check. I also think I read that the females and the males do look fairly similar, and there's a lot more dimorphism between the sexes in the red-billed. I think we'll stick with red-billed for now. But anybody with better Kenyan birding knowledge, please, by all means, do jump in. But whether they are bar-chested or red-billed, and so we also have Jameson's firefinch to consider as well, but I'm fairly confident these look as if they've got red bills. But it's such a beautiful bird group, the firefinches, those and the waxbills. We get some beautiful coloured other firefinch or other waxbills and smaller swee waxbills, the blackface that I mentioned, common waxbills. I've got a particular fondness towards as well. All of these little sea eaters are lovely. A real injection of colour. I wonder what the collective noun is for a group of firefinches. I'm sure between us we can come up with something rather fitting. Um, a blaze of firefinches, maybe? An inferno of firefinches. I quite like that one. Wild at heart, you're suggesting both red-billed and Jamesons that could be in this group. It's very difficult to tell on this camera, but certainly possible. Because I see some of them do look as if they have darker bills. But yeah, hard to say for sure. I find the Jamesons generally have a slightly darker back, but yeah, it's hard to see. The bill is the giveaway for the red billed. Catherine, you're saying the calls sound like both as well. I don't seem to be getting any audio coming through, so I will bow to your knowledge of Firefinch calls. They certainly are different. The Jamesons have quite a distinctive call. Can pick it in the bush, but for whatever reason, I don't seem to be getting any sound coming through my feed, which is odd. If you are as well, I'm glad. So yeah, well, let's say there are both in that case. Pindy to the power, you say you're so lucky to view the world in black and white. Not to view the world in black and white. The colour is so much better. I agree. As do birds, for that matter. Ooh, and what looks like a blue waxbill with a red beak. Okay, that's something else. We're going to have to double check. Or Kenyan birds, a blue red-billed waxbill. Okay, I think we've established I need to go to Lentore and go and do some birding because there really do seem to be some spectacular birds up there. Yeah, a quick search suggests that could be a cordon bleu waxbill. We'll have to continue looking, but that's a new one for me as well. Anyway, let's go back down to Tembe. But what a nice little birding trip that was. Ah, beautiful giraffe. Lovely. Haven't seen a giraffe on the camera for a while. Nice big bull by the looks of things. Also enjoying this lovely flush of greenery. Of course, they do feed on very tannin-rich plants. Big fan of the formerly known as acacia species, or genuses, I suppose we should say. Now Vachelias and Senegalias. But they're also very, very tannin rich, and there have been various studies to show over the years that things like giraffe that feed on these trees excessively have developed larger livers over the years to combat the additional tannin production. Of course, evolution is an arms race. One side of it begins to improve something, another one reacts, and then the next one reacts, and you almost sort of go up like a ladder as each of them counteracts one another's adaptations. They also produce an awful lot of saliva, which has a neutralizing effect on that tannin as well. Spas, you're saying you like a blaze of firefinches. I also like a blaze. I think we should try and get that implemented. And Mindy Tillpower, I'm glad we found you your favourite, a nice giraffe bull. Hopefully he'll come down for a drink. And we can marvel at his awkward dexterity. Dexterity? Mindy Tillipau, you were asking with regard to our giraffe and its ability to carry all the weight of that neck. You are asking if there are specific muscle groups. Um, I'm sure that they do have very well developed muscles, but actually the requirement for them has very little to do with the muscles to keep that massive neck upright. It's sort of held into position by something called a nuchal ligament, which runs down the back of the neck, and its natural relaxed position is to hold the neck straight up. So when you see a giraffe bending down to drink, for example, that actually takes, if anything, more effort than keeping it up because it has to bend, stretch that ligament to allow it to reach down. And then, if you've ever watched a giraffe drink, when they finish drinking, their head kind of pops back up because they then relax those muscles and that ligament snaps it back into position. So it's a very clever way of dealing with having to carry around that heavy skull and that very well developed neck. Is that its natural position is to be upright and requires actually more muscular use to bend it than it does to hold it upright. We've got an elephant with a floppy ear here. Some woolly neck stalks in the foreground. So when I was at Juma a couple of weeks ago, we saw a young elephant who we lovingly dubbed Dumbo because he had broken cartilage that flopped forward like that on both ears, which I don't think I've ever seen before. Only ever seen it on one ear like this. Quite how it happens, I did do a little bit of research, but wasn't able to actually get a definitive answer as to what causes it. It's some sort of cartilage-based damage, whether it's done when they're young or whether it's a genetic defect. I'm not entirely sure, but I thought it was very unusual to see one with two damaged ears, which makes me wonder if it isn't a genetic thing. And I'll be really interested to know how he does with thermal regulation, and these ones do with thermoregulating their body temperatures, because that back of the ear, as many of you will know, is very rich with blood vessels. The skin is very, very thin. By fanning the ears, it causes airflow over those vessels, which cools the blood and sends it through the rest of the body. So by having your ears constantly out in direct sunlight like that must be very, very difficult. Interesting to know if they spray an excessive amount of mud behind the ears, or if they have troubles regulating their temperature. And back to our giraffe, you want to know how those legs can support the weight of the animal. Well, it is a massive animal. It's a big giraffe bull, can weigh ton and a half, perhaps. Um, the bones in their legs are incredibly dense and incredibly heavy. It's very, very little marrow in them, and it's what we call a calciferous bone. It is a almost a solid lump of bone. It still does produce red blood cells from the marrow. It's just not similar, not like ours. So that's one of the ways they do it. Also, the way that very similar to an elephant as well, they have similar bones as the hippos. And if you just look at the way these heavy animals are positioned, the legs are directly under the central body mass. So they're supporting very economically all that weight like four pillars, basically. Um, so yeah, it's just very, very solid bone. But I agree, it's a miracle how they can do it. And the stresses of a giraffe running at high speed, they can reach 60 kilometers an hour, or well, 50 kilometers an hour, perhaps. It must be an incredible amount of stress on those legs and those joints, even when they just bend down to drink. But I don't think there's many animals that have as many adaptations out here as a giraffe does to deal with its unique physiology. This one elephant has just given up on life and is just having a good, hearty lie down in the mud. Good for you, Mr. Elephant. Wild at heart, you asking about those floppy ears again? Could it? I assume you're asking whether it could happen during the birthing process, i.e., maybe an ear gets stuck on the way out or something and breaks the cartilage. I don't know, but I wouldn't have thought so because at a very young age like that, the cartilage is not even fully developed. It's not fully formed. It's highly malleable and flexible. So I don't think that coming through the birth canal and sort of bending the ear in a funny direction would cause long-term damage. If you look at something like a giraffe with those ossicones, they come out folded flat against the head, and that's also cartilage when they're young. It takes a few years to ossify into bone. So, what at heart, I don't think so. But never say never. It's something that I remember researching for and never really found a satisfactory explanation so as to whether it is a genetic issue or whether it is an injury caused to the ear. It probably is a bit of both. But I will revisit and see if I can find anything more specific in terms of the information. Sandy Franklin, do animals with deformities often successfully breed? Less often than non-deformed animals, which is the case. I mean, it depends on the deformity, of course. Ultimately, it's sexual selection, and if for whatever reason the female decides that that male is not genetically suitable, she will not mate with that male, and then those genetics don't get passed on. It's one of the reasons that sort of one of the ways that nature deals with those problems. So take something like leucism. The chances of a leucistic animal mating is slim. Just because there's fewer of them. It's less normal than the other ones, so may not get chosen in terms of sexual selection. And particularly with leucism, for a prey animal, of course, they're far more likely to be predated upon because they're more visible. They often have issues with the sun and getting burnt. So, generally speaking, the animals with those genetic deformities don't get a chance to breed regularly, no. Well, thank you, everybody. These questions are coming through thick and fast today. And which animal has the most success of staving off predators and why? I'm going to have to give that some thought for a while. Things that spring to mind would be honey badger, just because it's particularly aggressive, which a lot of animals find intimidating. It also has that very, very loose skin around its neck, so even if it's grabbed behind the neck, it can still turn around and deliver a rather unpleasant bite. And yeah, just its general temperament keeps it relatively safe. Uh, Buffaloes do get eaten a lot by lions, but they also defend themselves very, very well. If long as they can keep the lions away from their back, that headgear of the buffalo is notoriously dangerous. I have seen 5 lions fail miserably to take out one Duggar boy before, one old male buffalo. They're so strong, so much adrenaline. Um, what else? I suppose porcupine would be a good one. Um, I'm sure there are others. Pangolin, yeah, there's a good one. Pangolins. I mean, lions just bat pangolins around like they're playing with a football. They can't get into that shell or those scales. So there's a few, but if I think of any others, I will let you know. Okay, lovely little trip down to Tembe. Let's head over to Kwamaratan for a change. Okay, so up the Pilansberg, another one of our African cameras at Kwamaratan, and how nice to see some zebras. Now, what are you eating, zebras? Are you practicing some geophagia? Or have you got some very, very, very short, tender, nutritious grass shoots there? And good afternoon, Dark Main Lover. Thank you for joining us. Glad you are enjoying the show so far. Yeah, interesting. Not quite sure what these zebras are feeding on. Almost looks like licking the floor, the one on the left. Yeah, definitely. Well, there you go. There is geophagia in action, licking of the soil, and you saw one have a little nibble on something there. So evidently, there's some good nutrients in that soil that this zebra feels that it is in need of. So there we go, geophagia in action. Very interesting to see. I wonder if there is an excess of salt in this area as well that's maybe been washed down from the more rocky region higher up the soil katina there, and maybe the salt has crystallized on this soil. But yeah, you can see him actually properly biting into the soil. Very interesting. Oh, this is very interesting behavior to watch. Say, my money's on some salts that have been washed down from somewhere higher up the soil profile. And the zebras are getting access to that. Maybe it dried off, baked in the sun, and formed that sort of crusty layer that we would associate with a sodic site here in the Lowveld. Or they say other interesting minerals in there that these zebras are after. But nice to see after previous discussions. Menu Tilipa, you're asking about herbivores feeding at different heights. So yeah, a lot of it's got to do with the type of digestive system that the animals have got. So something like a zebra and a buffalo, which have less efficient digestive systems. This is a hindgut fermenter. Yes, a buffalo is a ruminant, but not particularly an efficient ruminant. They're quite happy to eat large amounts of less palatable material. So taller grass is generally more fibrous and less tasty and contains less nutrition. And as a rule, animals prefer the shorter grass, but zebras and buffalo are quite happy to take that longer grass and the inflorescence, the flowering parts of the grass. whereas your more ruminant-based animals, wildebeest being the most classic example. Sorry about that. The more classic example being the wildebeest, they don't like long grass at all. They've got very efficient digestive systems. That food needs to stay in their body for a long time, so they need nutritious grass to make the most of it, because you don't want poor quality food in your stomach for a long time. It's a bit of a waste of time. So they'll eat the shorter grass, and then you get things like impalas and warthogs, which like eating almost down to the root. They like the very nutritious parts as well, or warthogs, particularly those rhizomes with that shovel-shaped face of theirs to dig over the grass. And when they all feed together and help one another to some extent, that's what we call facultative grazing. So, classic example, buffalo and zebra eat the top of the grass, the wildebeest come along and eat the lower grass, and then something like a warthog or well, you could say then the impala will come down and eat the really, really short grass because they've got much narrower muzzles, that split lip that allows them to get very, very close to the floor and get those fresh shoots that come through. And then you could even add, say, the warthog for sort of nuzzling over the grass and getting down to the roots themselves. Catherine, you're saying that your horse practices geophagia a lot. Yeah, so we see it in many animals. I've seen it in elephants, zebra. I've seen it quite regularly in, again, possibly due to their less efficient digestive system, that hindgut fermentation system. So not getting as much goodness out of what they're eating as a ruminant animal, and subsidizing their diet with whatever they feel is necessary. There are many phasias: geophagia, lithophagia of eating rocks, which things like ostriches and crocodiles will do, coprophagia of eating dung. What else do we have? Hyperphagia, birds sort of going on a bit of a food binge before migration to get more and more nutrition and fat storage in their bodies. Lots of different phasias out in animal behavior or ethology. Beautiful with the reflections there. Is that one licking the other one's hoof? Animal lover, no. Zebras do not mate for life. They have what we call a harem social structure. So you'll have a stallion who, through the course of his life, will try and, for want of a better word, recruit females to his harem. Often he will steal them off other males, and they will stay together. So they will stay together for the entirety of their life, unless another male steals his females. But it's not a monogamous pairing. It's quite normal for a stallion to have four, five, six, seven, eight females, not normally more than that. So when you do see those massive aggregations of animals like in the Great Migrations, that's multiple harems that have all come together due to a surplus of resource availability. And you're feeling blessed to be sitting watching wildlife so close up. I know it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. It's easy for me to say, but I do love being a part of the Wild Earth family, and I've always enjoyed sharing these experiences with my guests as a guide, and to know that I am sharing these experiences with potentially millions of people and helping to be the translator of nature for so many of you who are so passionate about Africa's wildlife. It's a very, very special feeling and a special experience and something wonderful to be part of, which we couldn't do without everybody's support who is watching. So thank you very much. And I'm glad that it's such a special a time for you, Anne? And Kathy Lee, you're enjoying the zebra's black and white sort of braided tail effect. I agree that they're amazing things. My personal favorite is the mane. I think it's just so cool how the stripes from the neck extend up into the mane. Yes, of course, it's just a elongated fur down the back of the mane, but I've always loved the fact that the mane follows the patterning on the skin. Oh, I think possibly you're referring to that one at the back there who has, yes, a very white upper part of the tail and a dark lower part. That is interesting. Quite a bushy tail compared to the other one. Fully, yes, there is a way of identifying the sex of a zebra apart from the obvious. There's a couple of ways. One is a bit of a rule of thumb, and that's that males generally are more contrasty than females. It's just something that I've observed over the years. Oh, we've got a common myna masquerading as an oxpecker. I find that stallions, the black tends to be blacker and the white tends to be whiter, and you just get a more of a contrasty effect. But the other classic way is to look underneath the tail. So we would need the zebra to be facing away from us to really put it into action. It still has to do with the genitalia, but if you were to move the tail out of the way and look sort of at the top of the thighs, you'll find that females have got a much broader black line running north-south in between the thighs, and the males have a much thinner, almost indistinguishable black line. But it's just because of the arrangement of the genitalia in the skin of a zebra is generally black, and just with the arrangement of those genitalia, there is more black visible whilst looking at a zebra mare from behind. Thus, you've been enjoying the show, and yes, I wonder what. Ah, now can you see there's almost there was very little black, except that one has got a bit of a strange marking there just on the left cheek. I wonder if that's actually a scar, perhaps, which is healed. Something looks a little bit offish there. But yes, I wonder what we'll see in the last few minutes. You see the foam nest frog nest there on that fallen tree. The new one on the right, the one on the left, which has since degraded, and the partially developed tadpoles that will be inside the one on the right have dropped down into the water. So you can see a sort of before and after shot there. And the one on the right will be containing those eggs, which will develop into little tadpoles, which will start to develop inside the protection of that foamy casing, which hardens to protect it against predators and the sun and drying out. And then as it starts to degrade after a week or two, and those little tadpoles start to get heavier after ingesting the yolk that they had in their eggs, they will drop down into the water beneath. And Anne, you were worried about the zebras. You were worried about that they were possibly a little bit vulnerable there, so close to the water. Well, there's always the danger of crocodiles, I suppose. And you're worried how they would confront a predator. Well, remember, at least by having the water there, they've only got one side to worry about, because unlikely that a lion is going to erupt from the water and grab one of them. Um, but they are far more situationally aware than often we give them credit for. Eyes on the side of the head, they can see a lot further around them than we can, hypersensitive to sound and smell, and they do possess a very, very strong kick as well. So, yes, potentially vulnerable, closer to water, but also good that there were two of them there. All right, so we're almost out of time, so let's go back to Tembe, and I assume those elephants are still there. What a lovely way to finish off another great afternoon. But yeah, sadly we are almost out of time, but it's been another wonderful day here with such diversity and some really interesting behavior. I've learnt some things about birds. I'm going to be looking out for bar-chested firefinches, and that cordon bleu waxbill was also very, very special to see for me. I think that's a first. And a huge thanks to all of you watching. You guys have inundated me with questions. I'm sorry if I've talked a lot, but I've been trying to get through all of your questions and comments, which is just great. Please, please do keep them coming in. I'm going to have to go back through these questions and see if I can find something else to read up about so we can discuss tomorrow. I will be back again tomorrow from 12:30 for another couple of hours. And I hope to see many of you there. But don't forget, the entertainment for the day is by no means finished. There will be our sunset safari going out at 4 o'clock. So do make sure you tune in for that. It is Saturday after all. Hilary B, I'm glad you've enjoyed the afternoon. Penelope Kenyon as well. And yeah, for all of you watching, thanks very much for your participation and interest. Stick with us and have a wonderful day wherever you are. And we will catch up with you again, same time tomorrow afternoon.